It may well be said that there are those among us trying to figure out what was he talking about. It is very important to understand that this opinion from Chief Justice John Marshall is included in Documentary History of Banking and Currency in the United States by Mr. Cruz and a Mr. Samuelson. It's one of three cases in this four volume series on the history of banking and currency in the United States, going at least up until 1968, all the way back to the time of the Mayflower arriving in the United States. This is an opinion from 1819. I have not finished it yet. It's very, very comprehensive opinion. I can only read a certain amount of it at a time, and then I have to process. But in the course of processing it, many things come to light, and insofar as they come to light, I think there's some matters to be attended to at this time that are going to be very necessary moving forward. The reason I'm doing it like this is because A, this would be beyond any sort of 99-year period where somebody thought that they were entitled to say they had some copyright on it. Even if they try to establish one, it holds no merit. The Department of Justice released information regarding these matters specifically, the concept of copyright and patents on information or on products put into the public in time frames prior to a certain date within the last 5 years. I'm not going to go into that now. This is not a copyright or patent claim. This is presented within a context of a case describing whether or not the United States of America, of the Congress of the United States of America, had the constitutional authority to establish a national bank. I contend the constitutionality or lack thereof regarding the establishment of a national bank has a lot of information concerning the constitutional authority that Congress has in other sorts of matters related to internal commercial development and regulation, and specifically regarding coinage and or some other process akin to coinage that may not have existed at the time the Constitution was written, but ultimately we'll have to make determinations concerning property, what is property, and what is the role of property, including private property versus public property, when it comes to regulation of commerce, but also a regulation of currency and or potentially coinage. So I'm going to read a few excerpts that he brings up that correlate very nicely with matters that are going on at this time. Beginning. It will not be denied that a bold and daring usurpation might be resisted after an acquiescence still longer and more complete than this. But it is conceived that a doubtful question, one on which human reason may pause and a human judgment be suspended, in the decision of which the great principles of liberty are not concerned, but the respective powers of those who are equally the representatives of the people are to be adjusted, if not put at rest by the practice of the government, ought to receive a considerable impression from that practice. Now, he also goes on to discuss it has been said that the people had already surrendered all their powers to the state sovereignties and had nothing more to give. But surely the question whether they may resume and modify the powers granted to government does not remain to be settled in this country. Much more might the legitimacy of the general government be doubted had it been created by the states. The powers delegated to the state sovereignties were to be exercised by themselves, not by a distinct and independent sovereignty created by themselves. To the formation of a league such as was the Confederation, the state sovereignties were certainly competent. But when, in order to form a more perfect union, it was deemed necessary to challenge this alliance into an effective government, possessing great and sovereign powers, and acting directly on the people, the necessity of referring it to the people and of deriving its powers directly from them was felt and acknowledged by all. The government of the Union, then, whatever may be the influence of this fact on the case, is emphatically and truly a government of the people. In form and in substance, it emanates from them. Its powers are granted by them and are to be exercised directly on them and for their benefit. He then goes on to say, but all legislative powers appertain to sovereignty. The original power of giving the law on any subject whatever is a sovereign power. And if the government of the Union is restrained from creating a corporation as a means for performing its functions, on the single reason that the creation of a corporation is an act of sovereignty, if the sufficiency of this reason be acknowledged, there would be some difficulty in sustaining the authority of Congress to pass other laws for the accomplishment of the same objects. The government which has a right to do an act and has imposed on it the duty of performing that act must, according to the dictates of reason, be allowed to select the means. And those who contend that it may not select an appropriate means, that one particular mode of effecting the object is accepted, take upon themselves the burden of establishing that exception. Now, as I said, I have not gotten through even 20% of this argument. It's very dense. He brings up two things that are very important. First, the act of incorporation, or the creation of a corporation, as he defines it, is merely a means by which to accomplish other methods. That there are other things that are sought, and that the creation of a corporation is but one possible means by which to accomplish it. Secondly, he brings into perspective something I have not encountered before in considerations of participation in society or political process. When he says power comes from the people, he first identifies it within a context of the role the people of the specific states had in approving the state constitutions and then approving whether or not to participate in the Union under the federal constitution. These were situations wherein he explains that the legislatures were merely delegates of the will of the people. And the question of sovereignty became at what level or in what manner or in what proportion did the people relinquish their sovereignty to the legislature. This is the essence of the question at hand as he presents it. The understanding that the referendum, as we understand it today, is one consideration, but that ultimately the expression of sovereignty was the Constitutional Convention. That was the will of the people. That was the expression of the sovereignty. The legislature is merely the delegation of that sovereignty based on the will of the people. So if there is an abuse by the legislature, then there's more than one concern at hand. Primary among it is at what level and in what manner did the people allow for the delegation of our sovereignty to a legislature get abused? And in what manner is the legislature no longer an expression of sovereignty? Perhaps this is the essence of a concern regarding not only the distinction between sedition and treason, but also a number of other constitutional rights, including ones that were directly relevant at the time that the people approved the original Constitution, but also at times later when there were changes and alterations to the original Constitution, how they were accomplished, and what it would mean today to deign to say that one has the authority of the people in attempting to effect an alteration to the Constitution, whether it be the Constitution of the federal government or it be the Constitution of a sovereign state that is in union with other sovereign states in a manner of an expression of delegation of the power of the people. I believe that is what he was attempting to get at. As I said, I'm nowhere near finished, but at this point in time, this seems to be relevant.